something made me walk out on the practice field next to the major practice field, set up 2 tackling dummies, which are about 3 feet high and hard to knock over. They're heavy on the bottom. Put them right next to each other. Took a football, walked about 10 yards away from them, turned around, went down on the football like that, turned back around, ran through the 2 tackling dummies, and did it again. I don't know what made me do that, but we could call it precognition because that's what it was. I was feeling something. And my body was getting me to do it, and I wasn't bossing myself around with this is a stupid idea, Bernie. Well, at Johns Hopkins, 2 days later, I was a punt returner. So I caught the punt over my shoulder. Remember the tackling dummies? I had my back to the tackling dummies. So I had to catch it over my shoulder. And like with the tackling dummies, I turned around. And what do you think I saw? What do you think? 2 Johns Hopkins guys right next to each other coming towards me. Well, I knew what to do. I just ran right through them. I practiced this already. And I went 90 yards for a touchdown. Well, that's precognition. How do I know that? How did I know that? That's part of trying to solve the riddle of time and how we pick it up, how we can know the future sometimes, as so many other people have, and then be prepared for it. That's what's amazing. It's not just, oh, I know it's going to happen. It's like, I'm ready for it. That's preparatory precognition. Hello. Yes, it's just me today. And I'm going to be talking about Life Changing Synchronicities, the book that I have recently published, describing the coincidences of my life starting from when I was very young. It becomes a kind of autobiography as told by coincidences. It's more than that. Each story has a doctor's notes, a comment on the story, and a principle that the story illustrates. And I'm going to go through many of the stories in that book with these ideas in mind. Let's be clear at the beginning about a few things. Meaningful coincidences are connections between what we're thinking and what happens in our environment. Often the environment mirrors what's in our minds. Well, that suggests a very important principle that is ignored by conventional science and most people who think about the nature of reality these days, because it suggests that our minds are embedded in our environment. And what that means is that we are both separate from what's around us and part of what's around us. An easy way to say that is me/we. Me, we. We are an individual, each of us, unique in our own place we stand in time and space. And we're also connected to what's around us. In a book I'm writing now, I'm suggesting that we are part of the collective human organism. Each of us is a cell in this collective human organism. And that collective human organism is part of a wider mind, the mind of Earth, which has 3 separate layers, the noosphere, the psychosphere, and the Gaiosphere. So we're connected and we're individual. And synchronicity shows us how that is happening in real time, gives us the experience of it. A lot of the two major meanings involved with meaningful coincidences like synchronicity and serendipity are how do we use that in our own personal life? How do we use that coincidence in our life that makes it meaningful for us now? And how do we explain them? Because people often say when these low probability events happen, what's the probability of that? Well, that's an indirect way of saying the probability is pretty low. And so when the probability is low, that makes our minds think, well, there might be something else going on here. And there is. But what is it? Many people say it's the universe. Other people say God. And there are many other explanations. But the primary explanation, the one for you to keep in mind, is the primary cause of a meaningful coincidence is you. You have to notice it. If you don't notice it, it doesn't exist. So it's a psychological idea, meaningful coincidence, because it starts with your recognition that two patterns, one here, one there, that appear to be unrelated by cause, as Jung called it, a causal connection, but they're connected by meaning. And the meaning starts with the two patterns having some similarity. Somehow they're the same, but not. They're not quite. But there's a remarkable similarity, and that similarity, without an obvious cause, often happening around the same time these two patterns come together, makes us wonder, how does that happen? And that's the way human beings have understood how reality works, by seeing two what appear to be strange events coming together and then seeing there's a link. Just imagine hunting in the forest many years ago, and you see a mark on a tree, and very clearly distinct, different mark. And then you keep walking and you see a certain animal, a deer-like animal off in the distance grazing. And then that happens several times. There's a mark on the tree, and then you see the same kind of animal a little later. So you put a connection between what seems to be unrelated events, that is, the mark on the tree, and then seeing the deer-like animal grazing, and you put the two together and say, well, that probably is the deer rubbing up against the tree in a certain way. That's the way we understand reality. And coincidences are ways to understand reality. They are clues to how things work. And the most important clue is that our minds are connected to our environments, to each other, to our natural world, and to the earth itself. Well, that's a way of talking about how to explain them. But how do you use them? That becomes the most pressing, useful part of all this. I mean, I'm curious. I've been curious since I was little, just what's going on here. And that's why I've gotten into this question of synchronicity, because I'm saying, why? What is going on here? What is this? I don't know. But that's curiosity, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the most common use of meaningful coincidences is it says to you that you are on the right path, that you were on the right path. Well, numbers often help people think that, or somebody says something in a crowd that you're not talking to that person, but it seems to confirm what you're already thinking about doing. For example, a guy is thinking about moving from one residence to another, and he's kind of holding on to the uncertainty of it. And he sees a truck ride by with a sign on it that says, "Time to move." Well, that told him that he was moving in the right way, and it encouraged him to move, which he did. Well, that's one of the most common uses of meaningful coincidences, and one of the most common versions of this. Most of you know this, and I like to ask people when I get on podcasts, I say, "What's the most common coincidence you think?" And they inevitably say, "What do you say?" They inevitably say, "I think of someone and that person calls me." I think of someone, and particularly dramatic when you haven't heard from that person for a while, and they contact you, yeah, maybe by phone, by email, by text, and there they are, right in your life again, and you just thought of them. Do we need any more examples of telepathy than that? Yeah, we do, but that's an opening to the idea that telepathy exists. Who starts it? Your mind, the other person's mind, the other person's thinking about you, you're thinking about the other person. Somehow it's a shared experience where each of you is thinking about the other, and one of you happens to make the call. That's the beginning of realizing that the popular podcast, the telepathy tapes, are tapping into something that's very real, which, man, I can tell you, modern science just does not want to believe. They just don't want to believe it. I try to write about telepathy for Psychology Today. I have a blog, and they don't like it. Well, maybe they'll change with the idea that the telepathy tapes have become much more part of the general population's thought patterns. And thinking of someone and they contact you, that's evidence. Well, all of this is very interesting to me. And I'm going to describe some of the stories that I've experienced during my life as a person growing up being curious. Yes, I was a curious boy, and curious has two different meanings. Curious is like investigating, trying to see what's going on, but curious is also odd. Oh, he's a curious kind of character. Well, I was both of those things. I didn't talk until I was 4 years old, and the first word I said first was magic chef. Magic chef, age 4. Where did he get that? He wasn't talking before. Well, it was the name of the oven, of the stove we had in our house back then, and it was right at my eye level at age 4, and I could see it, and somehow I knew that that was what that symbol had written on it, Magic Chef. So I was curious. I wanted to know how things work. I took a car clock apart and couldn't put it back together again. But there are two coincidences, two very, very meaningful coincidences in my life that I will describe now, because these are the ones that propelled me into being here talking with you now, writing 3 books on meaningful coincidences. And each of these is described in my book, Life Changing Synchronicities. Each of them share a certain characteristic. A certain characteristic. It might not surprise you that that characteristic is love. Is love. Love does a lot of things in our lives. Our open heart is very important in addition to our cognitive functioning. Love does a lot of things in the world that are positive. And this is love of my Father for me, and my Father's love, and my love for my Father. And my Father's love, which I think has come through the generations of the fathers who loved my father and the father who loved his father. And this was coming through my father to me as it goes through to my sons, my two boys, who are now in their 40s. Well, the first event that was most prominent in my life, that still has a lot of impact when I tell this story, was when I was 8 or 9. I came home from school in Shaker Heights, Ohio, on my bike and pulled up in the front yard, and there was my mother standing in the doorway. She'd never done that before that I remember. I said, "My mother's in the doorway," so I yelled at her or asked her, "Where's Snapper?" Snapper was our dog. I thought of him as my dog. They let me name him. He was teething. He was biting on trees. I thought that was pretty funny, so they let me call him Snapper. I said, "Where's Snapper?" I love Snapper. You know, boys and their dogs. I love Snapper. In Shaker Heights, we had what was to me a big house, and there was a garage, and behind the garage, my parents put the garbage, and in the garbage were like empty ketchup bottles and mustard bottles and pickle jars, each of which had some liquid in them. So Snapper and I would go behind the garage, and I'd find one of the jars, and I'd mix the ketchup, maybe some mayonnaise, and some pickle juice, maybe a little vinegar, whatever other juices were there. I'd mix them all together, and I'd sniff them, and I'd give them to Snapper to sniff. So we would share a sniffing experience of the garbage behind the garage of the house. Among the many things that Snapper and I did, I showed him how to jump through a car window. I would jump through the car window while my mother was at the doctor's waiting. We were waiting for her to come out, and then he would follow me in. So I showed him how to jump into the car. We did stuff like that. He was a lot of fun, and we had a lot of fun together. So I got home on my bike, and my mother says, "Why don't you go to the police station? Maybe they know where he is." To this day, I don't know why she said go to the police station, but I did. I got back on my bike and went back across the elementary school blacktop to the big road, which I'd never crossed because I knew the police station was on the other side of the big road. Crossed at the light, went down the street, parked my bike at the bottom of the stairs, walked up the stairs, pushed open this big door, walked in, and there was this big desk. And behind the desk was a big man in a uniform. So I walk in, he looks at me, and I say to him, "Have you seen my dog?" He says, "Sorry, son, we haven't." I started crying. I started crying. I needed that puppy, and nobody knew where he was. So I went back down the stairs. I was still crying and crying and crying, and I was just confused, didn't know what to do. And I got back on my bike, and instead of going left to the traffic light to cross the street the way I'd come, I went to the right. And I'm riding along maybe a minute, and I look ahead, and there's a dog coming towards me. There's a dog coming towards me. Snapper had a funny way of walking. He didn't walk with his both his hind legs behind his front legs. He did it had a sideways thing, so it looked like Snapper's walk. He was walking towards me. Is that Snapper? Is it Snapper? It was Snapper. I said, "Wow, wow," and that wow is still with me. Wow. So I stop my bike. He jumps up on my leg as if to say, if he could say, he would have said, I would have heard him say, "What took you so long?" Well, Snapper took 4 turns to meet me. I took one wrong turn to meet him. Well, what can we learn from an experience like that? Well, love brought us together. We loved each other. We have something as humans, and the dogs have, and birds have, and some fish have, and a lot of other animals. We have the capacity to get where we need to go. It's a kind of a GPS system, an internal GPS in our brains, in our minds. We have that capacity. It's not recognized. I think, again, back in the hunter gatherer days, we did have that capacity, trying to get to where we need to go. In the jungles of Peru, take some ayahuasca, and the you can you could find out where the animals you needed to hunt were, or the plants you needed to ingest for your own well-being were. We have this capacity, but they needed the drugs, and we still kind of do too in some instances, to be able to get where we need to go. And in this case, without knowing how we got there. I didn't know I was taking that turn. Snapper may have, I don't know, I couldn't ask him. You can get to where you need to be to meet the right person, to meet the right information. In the library, for example, a book might be calling you. For some people, the right book falls off the shelf or is illuminated for you. That's been called a library angel. You get to where you need to be without knowing how you got there, but there you are, and what you needed is there. We need to study that more, and I have. I did some experiments, which maybe I'll tell you later, but it indicated that I could be where I wanted to be at a time I wanted to be. I could do this consciously for what I was wanting to have happen to happen. You might be able to do that too, but it starts with your recognizing that sometimes you get where you need to be without knowing how you get there, which is one of the nice things about getting lost. One of the ways to increase synchronicities is to get lost. If you get lost, you're breaking patterns. Well, synchronicities also take place during times of transition. And losing Snapper was a time of transition, high emotion, and need. Those are 3 variables that influence whether you're going to have these things or not. Well, we moved from Shaker Heights, Ohio, when I was about 11 to Wilmington, Delaware. And I was beginning of 6th grade, and I knew from Shaker Heights Elementary School how to campaign for student council president. And coincidentally, they were starting to campaign for student council president for the first time. So I knew how to do it. So from Cleveland, from Shaker Heights, I picked up this idea of a poster. And the poster was like this, poster, fold it in half. So you're looking at the poster, and the outside of it says, open this poster and you will see. And then open the poster and there's a mirror. So the person sees themselves. And the post outside says, open this poster and you will see who is voting for Bernie B. You are. I won the election. But I didn't know what to do. I just knew how to run for the office. I didn't know how to run a student council meeting. And that was reflected later when somehow, for some reason, the people running the puppet show that our class put on asked me to be the Wizard of Oz. And I was the wizard in The Wizard of Oz. And if you know the story, you know the wizard had a lot of bells and whistles, kind of like my campaign was, but he was just a guy pushing some buttons. And that fits so perfectly with what I did, which is have a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of like fancy, had a band playing for me in part of my campaign. But then you pull back the curtain, there's Bernie. He doesn't know how to run a student council meeting. That was the kind of irony of coincidence, again, reflecting back my environment, telling me who I was. That was in that was in elementary school. Then in high school, I liked to do sports. My brother and I, brother Alan, played a lot of baseball together and a little football. And we were both on the high school baseball team. And when I was in 10th grade, I only batted a few times and I batted like 103 or something. I couldn't hit very well that high school pitching. But for my junior year, a new coach came in, a new coach. And he taught me how to drag bunt, which is to stand there and fool the third baseman into thinking I'm going to swing. And I put a bunt down and run to first base. Well, because that coach showed up, John Michaelwitz, to teach me that at the right time when I was ready for it, I got 7 bunts that year out of 17 hits, and I won the batting title as a result of being able to bunt. So here somebody showed up at the right time to teach me what I needed to know in order to excel at batting. That was pretty far out and groovy, as we learned to say later. Well, I also played football, and I played football when I was in college, as well as baseball. And I went to Swarthmore College, which was a small college, so I could play football there. During my senior year, there were 2 events that suggested that I had, as you do, precognitive abilities, that you can predict the future. Not 100%, but with some probability. And there were 2 examples. A third of the last game, we were playing Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland. And a couple of days before we drove down there in our bus, something made me walk out on the practice field next to the major practice field, set up 2 tackling dummies, which are about 3 feet high and hard to knock over. They're heavy on the bottom. Put them right next to each other. I took a football, walked about 10 yards away from them, turned around, went down on the football like that, turned back around, ran through the 2 tackling dummies, and did it again. I don't know what made me do that, but we could call it precognition because that's what it was. I was feeling something. I was feeling something, and my body was getting me to do it, and I wasn't bossing myself around with this is a stupid idea, Bernie. Well, at Johns Hopkins, 2 days later, I returned. I was a punt returner, and their punter was terrible. He wouldn't kick it very well. He kicked out of bounds a lot and short, so I couldn't run him back until one punt. He really got a good punt off. I could hear the loudspeaker guy saying, "And Joe Smith got this big, great punt off." It was so much of a punt that where I was standing was too close. So I had to turn around and catch the punt over my shoulder. So I caught the punt over my shoulder. Remember the tackling dummies? I had my back to the tackling dummies. So I had to catch it over my shoulder. And like with the tackling dummies, I turned around. And what do you think I saw? What do you think? 2 Johns Hopkins guys right next to each other coming towards me. Well, I knew what to do. I just ran right through him. I practiced this already, and I went 90 yards for a touchdown. Well, that's precognition. How do I know that? I mean, how did I know that? That's part of trying to solve the riddle of time and how we pick it up, how we can know the future sometimes, as so many other people have, and then be prepared for it. That's what was amazing. It's not just, oh, I know what's going to happen. It's like, I'm ready for it. That's preparatory precognition. Well, the the coach for the team we were playing the next week, team was Pennsylvania Military College, and they were about 3 miles away from our Swarthmore College, and they were the tough guys, military guys, and we were the intellectuals down the street. So we had this thing, uh, and they should beat us every time. Well, before the game, like on Wednesday before the game, I was coming out of DuPont Library on the Swarthmore campus, and I had this feeling of like somebody was after me. Somebody was trying to hurt me. Somebody's going to do something to me. I remember standing there on the stairs outside the library door and saying, "This is weird. I feel like somebody around here doing." So I walked down the stairs and walked around the side of the building to see if anybody was there. Nobody was there. So I said, well, okay. So I went back to my dormitory. On Saturday, I found out later that the coach head of PMC, the Pennsylvania, our rivals, had scouted me and had said that to the newspapers that Beitman could be a pro wide receiver. He could play professional football at wide receiver. So they had been taking a good look at me. I didn't know that then. So I get out on the wide receiver away from the rest of the team and supposedly going out for a pass. And I hear, for the first time ever, the opposite team, three guys on the other team saying, three guys on the opposite team saying, Beitman's out here. Beitman's out here. I say, what? Well, to hear my name called by the opposite team just confused me. I just like that. So I went out for the pass, and when I got up, I didn't have the ball. I felt dazed. They got me. They got me. So I had a bit of a concussion from the collision. And I didn't run very well after that and got hurt as a result. But when we looked at the film to see what happened when Beitman went out for the pass, there were three guys from PMC coming after me, but I had gone up in the air for the ball and come down on my head. I had done it to myself. I was thrown off so much by all this. So I was right. They were probably having plays during the week where somebody was being Beitman and they were tackling him. So they get ready for me. But I did it to myself because I was thrown off so much by their paying attention to me. Another precognition that I couldn't have figured out. That one is having a feeling, but not like the practice dummies being able to say pretty well or recognize pretty well what I imagined to happen was going to happen. It did happen. The other major event, the other major coincidence that has gotten me to be talking with you today involved my father and me, just my father and me, not Snapper this time. Snapper was gone by then. I was in San Francisco in 1972, and I was standing at a sink in the Victorian house I was staying in, and It was 11 p.m. San Francisco time, and I started choking in a way that I never have before, never have since. Something was in my throat. I couldn't get it out. I couldn't get it out. I couldn't get it out. I kept choking. It was scary. Something in my throat. I couldn't get it out. The next day, my brother called me and said that our father had died at 2 a.m. Wilmington, Delaware time, which was 11 p.m. San Francisco time. He had died choking on his own blood in his throat. So around the time my father was choking on his own blood and dying, I was choking 3,000 miles away. Well, that got me to thinking even more about all this. I mean, am I the only one that this happens to? Doesn't this show how closely connected my father and I were, and I think still are? So I wondered about that and developed a survey called the Weird Coincidence Scale, or survey, and asked that question on it. Do you feel the pain or distress of a loved one at a distance? How often? And a lot of people said sometimes. There's been more written on that now, names given to it. I call it simulpathity, at the same time feeling at a distance. That this is another common human experience. And guess what? Guess what? It used to be called telepathy. Now, think of the word telepathy. It's tele, at a distance, like telephone, hearing at a distance. This is feeling at a distance. Telepathy is feeling. So the original definition of telepathy was feeling at a distance. Then it got changed into like more cognitive, more thoughts rather than feeling. But I was experiencing something that the earlier researchers into parapsychology had already labeled and known. This was feeling the distress or the pain of a loved one at a distance. What's also questionable here is, can you also feel the joy of someone at a distance? And without going through the details, I did that recently. A friend of mine in China was deeply enjoying being around waterfalls way out in the countryside in China, while I was walking through a huge rainstorm, a thunderstorm here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I loved being soaked. I loved feeling the vibration of the thunder and having it go through me. And she experienced becoming one with the waterfalls. It can happen positively, but the key thing is you got to be able to talk to each other and know these things are happening. So they're probably happening a lot more than any of us ever know. And they're really common among identical twins. So the simultaneous choking and snapper link my father with me and have gotten me much more deeply involved with studying coincidence, because it was feeling, it was love, plus curiosity. And so I've written this book to try to help you do your own coincidence diary so that you can look back, as I am doing with you right now, and being able to see what your stories are and be able to see what the patterns are in your stories. And here there are patterns here. There are patterns that I keep repeating. And I've just told you about some that I've kept repeating. Professionally, now, in my career, I became a psychiatrist. One of the most important coincidences involved, again, my being curious and wondering and looking around. So when I was in college, I got bored studying upstairs. So I went down into the stacks where they had lots of books that weren't in usual circulation, but available. And one book jumped out at me. It was a thin green book by George Kelly, a fairly little well-known Ohio State University psychologist. The key essence of that book was expectation influences experience. That what you expect to have happen influences what happens. Kelly said it in a way I like to say a person's processes are psychologically channelized by the way they anticipate events. Expectation influences experience. So I knew I wanted to keep coming back to this book. And I did. I've got a copy of it here, and I've read it several times, and it still stayed with me. So when I was in San Francisco, after I finished my internship, I needed to get a residency in psychiatry. So I heard that Stanford was a pretty good place to go. It wasn't very far south of San Francisco where I was living. So I got in my trusty Volvo, which I still have, a 122S, dark blue, and went down to an interview um, with, it turned out to be a guy named Fred Melchus. And when you go to these interviews, they have their stock questions. So he said, "Well, what books are you reading?" Well, I didn't want to do a psychoanalytic Freud book. If you read the book, you'll see that I was married to the daughter of a past president of the American Psychoanalytic Association. So I'd had enough of that. That marriage did not work out. So I didn't bring that up. I brought up George Kelly. And if Fred could have fallen off his chair, he's a big guy, he would have. Um, he said, that's the fundamental researcher behind the research I'm doing now. Well, that immediately made a connection between us. I got admitted to the residency at Stanford, and Fred became my supervisor. That's a that's a long stretch from the library at Swarthmore College as an undergraduate to then after medical school being interviewed for psychiatric residency as what turned out to be a very good place, Stanford. Well, when I was at Stanford, I had the opportunity to get back in my car and drive up the street, the Bayshore Freeway sometimes, and sometimes 280 to San Francisco, and it was hippie time. I could try to be part of the hippie subculture, which I got a sense of when I was an intern in San Francisco. So I was driving through Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. I had a week off between internship and residency when I didn't have to be any place. No place. Nobody had anything on me. I could do anything I wanted. So I'm driving near the Oak and Fell side, near the Japanese gardens in Golden Gate Park, and there's this hippie chick with her thumb out wanting a ride. Well, she was all dressed up in hippie kind of stuff, so I said, okay. Gave her a ride. She said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I've got no place to go." She says, "Let's go over to Berkeley. There's a street fair over there." Well, that introduced me to Paula, and that Paula introduced me to the hippie subculture of San Francisco because she was buried right in the middle of it. And I don't mean buried, and she was there with it. And she wanted me around because she had broken her back, and I'm a doctor, and she didn't, it had a little break in it, and she thought it was because she was doing black magic with money. Well, I don't know, but she helped me go to Union Street and buy suede leather pants and a see-through gray shirt with ruffles on it. And I got some boots at the Army Navy store on Haight Street, and I was ready to be a hippie. Yeah. I ended up having octagonal wire rim glasses with purple lenses. So that was my hippie outfit that Paula helped me get into. And if you get the book, you'll see I got a lot of stories happening in San Francisco. Uh, a lot of stories. Um, one of the best ones was going to the Fillmore, which was only one Fillmore then. That's a Fillmore Auditorium, and uh, and going there with some of the people that I had met through Paula, and one of them named Thaddeus Golas, who wrote a book called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment, and it's a great little book. He wrote it mostly on LSD, and it's got a lot of stuff about the nature of reality in it. So he said, let's go to dance." So we all took some LSD and went over to the Fillmore, and there was Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead on stage doing his guitar work. It was as if there was a light shining on him, and it wasn't a spotlight from the inside. It was more than that. There was like coming from someplace else, and it was focused on his hand, moving over the guitar strings. And as he moved his hands, the hippies in the place danced with the rhythm that he was creating. It was as if he was moving, and his hand was the hand of God. That was a profound feeling for me to have that experience. Well, it means that you can see things that maybe are there, but you don't know are there. Picking up Paula was taking a chance, and that door opened to the hippie subculture. So there's a lot of doors that this story tells you that go ahead and open them. You might see something and learn which doors not to open by opening ones that get you in trouble. But there are doors in your life that say, try this, try this, see what happens. Well, there was a door that happened toward the ends of my hippie time where I was getting bored being the hippie thing because all the hippies had gone north um, into the redwoods and Mendocino County and north. So Paula had a husband who we called Crazy Arthur for various reasons. Uh, he was kind of crazy. So Arthur was caught driving the wrong way on a street near Golden Gate Park. The cops pulled him over. Paula asked me to go to court with Arthur, and I did. And his lawyer was a guy named Mike Stepanian, big guy with curly black hair, Armenian descent from New York City. I'm Mike Stepanian. So we walked down the aisle, and Arthur unfurls this piece of toilet paper, the toilet roll, and he reads from it to the judge. He says, "Judge, I respect you and I respect porpoises." The judge said 3 months. Arthur got taken off, and Stepanian and I started walking out. And Stepanian says, "Hey, I'm going to Santa Barbara tomorrow to play rugby." I said, "Well, I played rugby for Yale, and I'm better than the guy who played wing for Columbia." And Stepanian says, "Meet us at the airport. San Francisco airport at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, and you can go with us. So I entered in from the hippie to the dope lawyer culture and the rugby culture, and ended up having a great 6 week European tour where we went to Romania and Paris and London and Wales and played rugby over 6 weeks. It was really amazing to be able to do that. Again, a door opened and I went through it. It's a matter of choice. So the coincidences are suggestions. They're not they're not commands. So open doors. Think about possibilities if you do it. Follow your intuition. Make some sense out of what's going on around you. And you will not only be able to have some pretty amazing and problematic stories. I mean, walking through some doors has gotten me in trouble. It'll get you in trouble, but that's how you learn which doors to go through. And you will also get a clearer idea more and more for your view of how reality works. So I thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you read some more of the stories and let me know what you think of some of them and what you think of what I've tried to tell you today.